working in his shop with him, doing transmissions and different things. What's kind of interesting about these is, as far as I can tell, the hammers are almost identical. They're probably from the same manufacturer. But what is really typical with mechanics or guys that work in confined areas is that to have tools with short handles on them. You'll notice that any heavy equipment mechanic, or many of them, the old school guys would take and they would actually cut the handles off or make their own to make them a little bit smaller. Therefore they work better in confined areas. And I don't know for certain, but if I had to guess from looking at it, I'll bet that this is a mass-produced handle. This would have been probably one that you would have bought, or maybe a replacement handle. It could be the original, although I doubt it. This one here, I'm pretty convinced that Granddad probably made this one himself. You can see he's taken about 1.5 inches off of it, and it just doesn't have that look and line. It has that look of a homemade handle. You know, you don't have that nice, beautiful, sweeping palm swell right there that goes into a taper. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's something that was probably built for utility. You know, a guy that needed a handle and needed it quick, needed to make his, you know, to use it to make his living, and that's what you get. So we need to decide on which one of these that we want to replace, because both of them are loose. I know folks will say, well, you know, your granddad made that, you should probably keep it. Well, I disagree with that. I'm not about collecting tools to keep. I like to have them, I like to use them, and it gives me a lot more pleasure to grab it out of the toolbox and know that I have a family tool that's still usable. So what I think I'll do is I'll choose the one that has the best condition on the striking face, and that's the little guy right here. Before we select the wood, let's cut the old handle off and do a quick resto on the head and see what we got. Make sure we don't have any cracks or anything that's hidden behind the rust. When I set up my shop, something that's been so helpful is to have set it up kind of like a galley kitchen. You know what a galley kitchen is? A galley kitchen is considered to be the most efficient use of space. That's what you see typically with restaurants, high production. You'll see it. I think even on a submarine one time they kind of set it up that way. And it's basically two bars. So you have your workbench here, and then you have your most used tools right behind you. So when you're working and you need something, it's very efficient to simply turn around and to grab the saw or the chisel or the plane that you need and right back to the workbench. That's kind of the galley concept. Now we need to punch the handle out of the eye. One thing that you want to do when you're doing a project like this is make sure you mark the top of the handle. There are subtle differences on the taper for the way that they're made, and if you put them on backwards, you'll have a hard time of keeping it tight. So you can use a silver Sharpie or take a file and just make a little cross in it, just something that's a reference point. Now on the smaller handles like this, I can typically just use the holes and the dog holes in my bench and just punch that through. If you find something larger like an axe handle or stuff, you can just prop that up on a couple of pieces of hardwood. For the axes, I use this big drift, and then for the smaller ones like this, I'll just use a heavy punch. But you should be able to knock that. If there are any wedges in there, you want to remove those, but I don't believe there's one in this one. A great way to clean up these vintage tool heads, hammers especially, is just your bench grinder. And when you set up your bench grinders, you want to put a stone on one side, a grinding stone, and then a wire brush on the other. A lot of them come this way. It just makes it much more versatile. With just a little bit of work on that wire wheel, you can really clean these beautiful old vintage tools up. I've always had an affection for ball peen hammers, just the design of it, and look at the taper in it. You just don't see that with The newer ones is so just beautifully balanced, beautifully made. Just the coolest thing. All right, so we kept our marks right there. So now we've got to, this is where we got to really inspect the hammer. If you're going to go to a lot of trouble of making a handmade handle, you don't want to make it for something that's damaged or cracked. And this is, overall, this is in really good shape. We can see that the face doesn't have a lot of chipping. When you're looking for these at garage sales or antique stores, you should be able to buy them for anywhere from 50 cents to $2 or so. If they have a lot of chipping or heavy chipping on the edges of the face there, you might want to continue looking, unless it is a family tool that you want to keep. That's a different thing. Now on the back side, on the ball side, we can see that we've got a lot of scratching in some rough areas there from pounding against something that was sharp. Let's dress that. Let's clean that up. We don't want that, because you want to be able to use a ball peen hammer to work with sheet metal and to round things. And if you have a striking face that's all chewed up like that, it's going to transfer into your work. So we can put this on the vise, and I think we can clean this up really nicely. Little projects like this are the exact reason why I have a machinist vise in here. I mean, you can hold these things with the wood vise, but not recommended. You won't want to use a lot of metal, and where you're doing filing and stuff, it gets in and messes up. When we're working with these heirloom tools, we want to be careful and to not beat them up. And you have to. A lot of times, these machinist vise will have corrugated or really heavy textured replaceable jaws on them, and the steel on these is very hard. And if you clamp these up, they will mar the surface. No matter, I don't care how careful you are. So you have a couple options. What you want to use is a jaws, kind of these inserts. You can use aluminum. You can use brass. Any one of these is going to be softer than the tool metal. What I typically end up using more than any of those are these they're just some sort of a rubber, and these work really well. And what it does is that you can get it in there and you can bite your tool very tight. They have a little bit of flex in them, but they're so sticky that they don't seem to slip out near as much, and it gives you the ability to get a lot nicer job on your filing. So we'll clamp that in there nice and tight. A good all-around file to use is of course, a mill bastard file. This is a really special one. This is a Nicholson. This is a vintage file a mill bastard file here that is brand new, an 8-inch, and boy, the old ones they're just so much better. This is a file card. You want to have a clean filing surface. The steel in the file will actually pick up and store material, and it will dull the file quicker, and it will not be as effective. So have this close by. Always have these together, and then periodically clean the file. The process that you use to resurface the round portion of your ball peen is always keep your file moving. You don't want to go file across, because you'll file flat spots. So what that means is, as we're filing, we're moving up and we're rolling at the same time. So it's a motion just like this. And you're working your body around, and you're basically connecting. Just figure a line around there, like a hat brim sitting around there, and you're connecting up to that point there. And you're taking out those cuts and those imperfections. Now, if you have things that are super deep, you'll have to make a decision to continue, just to leave them, or to continue taking the head down. This one here is not too bad, so I think and I'm moving my body as I need be, keeping everything symmetrical. Flip your file over when it starts to load up a little bit. Once you removed all the damaged areas there, I'll just kind of do a once over the top. And kind of rebuild, come at 2 angles, rebuild that round surface. In a little bit of practice, you can get it. We can see we've got all of the imperfections out of there. We've got a nice even dome there. Now there's going to be quite a few tool marks in there. To get rid of those, what seems to work best is about 150 grit sandpaper, or emery paper, even better. And you can kind of, don't put it on a block. You want it to be able to kind of bend and form around the dome, and just go around in kind of a circular pattern. And in 5 minutes or so, that will remove those tool marks and kind of knock down the high spots and give you a really nice, consistently even dome on the hammer that looks will look original. When you're done with the sanding, just take that back over to your wire brush on your grinder, and you can see that looks a lot better right there. It's nice and smooth and round and very consistent. Much, much better. Now on the strike face, this has to be done right. You have to be really careful with these. You have to remember not to grind them flat. The strike face needs to have a bit of a convex in it, and a little chamfer around the outside. This is actually really good, and the more I look at it here, I'm not going to fool with it. If you wanted to change that, of course, the process is just the same. You file across and rotate around, and then put a little chamfer around there, a little bevel. That will prevent it. It'd be less likely to chip. If you misstrike and you hit the corner, it's going to be a much stronger edge. So it wouldn't be a bad idea you can improve upon that by just going around and putting that chamfer on there, cleaning it up. That's quite a transformation there. This is a great project for you. This is, if you want to get into tool restoration, you want to start building up, your collection of quality vintage tools. This is a good place to start. A ball peen hammer. You want a small one, you want a large one. Maybe a 16 ounce and a big masher, 32 or so, is pretty nice, or heavier for heavy work. But this is just a staple around the shop. To have a small piece of railroad tie, or a small anvil, or just using the back of your vise for pressing little things, it's indispensable. It's an incredible tool, but look at the difference. I mean, these two were pretty comparable when we started, right? And looks a lot nicer. Well, of course, we'll need to do both of them, but this one for now. So next video, we'll do the handle. We'll select grade a very special piece of hickory. There's nothing better for tool handle than